So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo, and this is Monday Live, something that we do every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Welcome. So this being February, we are talking about how we're all collectively going to deliver smarter buildings. So that's the focus of the whole month. Our agenda today, February 14th, happy Valentine's Day to everybody, is that we'll have our normal chit chat, and then we'll talk about delivering smarter buildings. And what we want to do is we want to focus on the two layers of the smarter stack, the purpose layer and the operations layer. We feel that we really haven't put enough attention to those layers, so we're just going to dedicate the whole show on that, and then hopefully some open discussion. So would really love to get everybody's input as and when we start to do that. But before that, Mr. Sinclair, what's going on?
Okay, well, happy Valentine's Day to everybody for sure. And that sort of leads into our March issue is going to be the Women's Day issue. Last year we called it Our Industry's Amazing Women. We're still working on the theme, but we're going to focus on that and introducing the major women in our industry that are making shakers and makers. And I think the other big theme is for us to reach out and involve more women in our industry. And they got started at AHR with their Smarter Women, Smarter Buildings. It was a good session. And there's been some social media activity on that as well. So that's been good. We had the article, the wins and wins of AHR Vegas. We're still feel that we need a flag to rally under for AHR Expo. I was really pleased that everybody was rallying under automated buildings, but I think going forward we need to have like a more permanent identity, and I'm very willing to help create that. The actual number was 30,678, which is just an amazing number during COVID. So we're extremely pleased with that. And another post was Skip Freeman posted on our Automated Buildings LinkedIn group that is, if you're retired and want to have a BAS job working from home, contact him. But I thought it was a very innovative approach, and it's probably something that we all should do. Is we're trying to reach out and get people wherever we can. The women, of course, we have a lot of women in our industry that I think are poised to move into a position of more significance and power. And we also have this situation that there's a lot of folks that are retiring who have a lot of information, what they call it, the gray hair tsunami or something like that, but actually reaching and pulling them back for a portion of their time is probably useful for both them and for the industry. So I challenge you to reach out and grab those folks.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Ken. Next up, we have Roger. What's going on, Roger? Oh, Roger's he's not here. He was here a minute ago, so we'll come back to that. Mark, you're muted.
Okay, so you probably did. So anyway, one of those days. So I found this today, which I thought was kind of interesting. It's a new, and maybe others on joining us today have heard of it. I haven't. A new organization, IPBLIS, which is basically a group of, the logos there, BACnet, Connectivity Standards, DOLI, Thread, Open Connectivity, KNX, have gotten together and to push the integration, interoperability of systems via IP. And again, I think this is interesting in that we, on this program and others, have really talked about the increased use of IP as a outlet for making our buildings smarter. And the fact that these leading organizations are coming together to push that stronger and further, I find interesting. And again, the commonality is it's all about IP architecture and so forth and so on. And so just wanted to share that with the group.
I'd add to that real quick if I could. I can tell you that Lawnmark is looking to join that organization as well. Right now, they're working on that.
Cool.
I'm not sure it's actually new, but there's obviously a lot of buzz about the organization, but I think I've seen it around for about a couple of years at least.
Yeah.
But they're gaining momentum, definitely.
Well, I think the rallying about IP, and I think that's sort of new, I believe, or it's stronger, either
Yeah,
one.
definitely.
Something.
Okay. Great.
Guys, it just occurs to me, Anto, in how we organize information on Monday Live, we periodically talk about different organizations that are affiliated in this space. Do we have a place in Monday Live where we're keeping track of them?
I believe it's in your notepad in front of you.
Yeah. That's really funny.
Notepad? What's a notepad?
Well, maybe we should reach out to them and have them join us and tell us live what they're
Yeah.
doing and pitch their story. Sounds good. I had not been aware of them for sure. So,
But you raise a good point, Steve, and I think that's one of the things that sort of we're trying to sort of figure out here.
Yeah. Right.
Roger, you're up.
Yeah, I just saw this. I thought it was interesting because we've been speculating for a while about whether people are going to be cutting back on offices, and just saw this from Harvard research. They're just kind of saying 3 reasons why they think people aren't cutting back. You can see on the left there, they're saying that, you know, there's not much movement, a little bit down on office space and up on warehousing and stuff in terms of reduction of space. But they're saying that due to social distancing, you know, people are still needing more square feet. But also employees want to work don't want to work on Mondays and Fridays. So everybody's still in the office on through the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I wonder whether at some stage when it all settles down, they say, yes, you can have Monday or Friday off, but then you've got to have work the other days. I don't know. But I think there's a couple of other aspects as well, as I think people's leases probably haven't come to an end yet. And there's still some people still waiting what's going to happen with working from home and how much space they need. So I think it might take a little bit longer to affect it. So we might see a shift over the next couple of years, but they're suggesting at the moment that it's that there's not much movement in the lack of office space being retained.
I think that's Apple's model, Roger, that they're going to give their folks a choice of either Monday or Friday. I think I'm not sure if it's both.
Okay.
But then you've got to be in the office like at least 2 of the other days, the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I think they're still experimenting with their stuff, but that's the last I heard.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense.
That's kind of interesting. So we want to use our buildings only 3 days out of the week now, right?
Yeah.
We need to find co-partnered businesses to utilize our buildings from Friday through Monday, right? Rent it, sublease it for the weekend.
I can tell you if San Diego's anything to go by, there's people working on the beach there. So.
Well, then there's the roll-on effect, right? What's the effect of all the support industries around those offices? You know, the coffee shops, the restaurants. You know,
Yep.
If people aren't there Mondays and Fridays, right? How do you restructure your business?
Okay, let's move on. We've had that one, John.
yeah, hi. Continuing with a theme that I've been following recently is, evidence of corporate and other large organizations focus on sustainability. I thought this was interesting. It's the first time I've seen it. It was published February 11th that Salesforce is now tying executive compensation to ESG goals. We talked about, it's in inner reports and, that it's filtering down, but this is a formal announcement. You can find it on smartenergydecisions.com. Seemed like a pretty direct, evidence of that. That's what it takes to, oftentimes make organizations responsive. I in my career have heard over time that organizations want to do things around energy efficiency, but actually incentives worked against it. The compensation incentive, not intentionally, they just did, and organizations had been slow to change. So I thought that was an interesting story. And then that the Army set a net zero goal of 2050. I'll be honest, I haven't read the whole thing, but I'm thinking that's 2050 is a long time away, and people argue that that's not soon enough. But for the military to set a goal of net zero, I think is pretty bold, whether it's going to take them, 25 years or less. So anyways, this continued momentum, I think, is good. I'm waiting to see what specifically that translates in, because my sense, and this is just a sense, is that, okay, we're going to add a lot of solar. We're going to do, I worry that not enough of the focus is on the unfortunate arts that a lot of the people on the panel plays, which actually eliminate waste. It's so much nicer to say, I bought this thing and it now saves X, right? Because, the LED light bulb problem, I call it, right? So remains to be seen. That's my commentary.
Okay, thank you again, John. Anno.
Yeah, actually, building on both John and actually Roger's slides, interestingly enough, we're seeing the same message over and over, John, about a much stronger focus on ESG sustainability initiatives, being quite wide. A lot of discussion. I've seen similar things about it being tied to corporate incentive packages as well. We've heard several stories about that as well. So there's definitely a focus. A lot of the big heavy hitters we work with are, heavily focused on ESG. To your point, John, we're not getting any clear messages of what does that actually mean? What are you going to do about it? We're getting a lot of discussion from fairly high up in the organization, setting net zero goals, setting ESG goals, trying to percolate it down. There's a lot of work going on in carbon tracking initiatives too, and so at the moment they're kind of attacking the big rock stuff, like you said, solar panels, planting trees in Brazil, all good stuff. But the people we're talking to are saying, yes, we're going to have to drill down, and they're still working it out. That's what we're getting. They're working out what that means, right? That they know that there's only so many trees you could plant in Brazil, and then, what else can we do type equations. Mm-hmm. This is a good report. If you haven't been to that website, obviously a little bit self-serving for their website, but they do track some interesting metrics in this area. And then they also, in the report, they also tie it to the remote working trends, which is also an interesting perspective of how do you tie ESG net zero to the changing working from home trends as well, which just puts another dimension of, well, if I'm only here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, what does that mean from trying to get to energy savings for my building?
Hey, can I follow up on that real quick? And just relate an anecdotal story. We had a customer partner, they had a successful ongoing deployment of analytics around energy and meter data, had been running, almost 2 years, producing good results. And a new ESG group was formed at the C-level and almost stopped the entire project because they didn't understand it.
Yep.
Okay. Moving on. So from me, I have two things. One is a continuation of something that we've been monitoring, I think, as a group, which is the repurposing of buildings. So this is a story in Fast Company about repurposing shopping malls into hospital, and more specifically, it talks about sort of elder care hospital, which is a little bit different because you actually need the space and you need ins and outs. So that things like having lots of parking is actually a great thing. Interesting article, but just sort of part of that trend of reusing properties that we have. The second is very sort of macro level. So there's been a thing called VUCA, which apparently has been around for quite some time, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, which is really how quite a number of academics are sort of painting what we're living through. That's kind of the attributes of what we're living through. And the folks in Oxford University came up with a new version of that called TUNA, which stands for turbulent, uncertain, novel, and ambiguous. And it's really very sort of interesting concept. And this site here, Both Brains Required, has this and a whole bunch of other sort of pictograms, I guess I'd call it, with some really sort of interesting analysis done at that sort of global level in terms of how things like ESG and impact investing and other things are actually sort of playing out. Very, very interesting. It's not a very big read. If you just go to that bothbrainsrequired.com link, you'll see some sort of interesting things, and it actually talks about how the whole world economy works as a system, which is something that we talked about last week. But anyway, that's again following on the sort of the ESG side of things.
That's a great cartoon.
Yes.
One other thing, just shifting gears real quick before we get into the topic at hand. Obviously, everybody saw the Super Bowl, and hopefully some of you, like me, paid attention to some of the commercials and stuff. And not to debate which was good, which was bad, but I did notice one thing there. So we saw a certain company touting and talking about the metaverse, which was no surprise. But if you did notice, another leading company, and John, you mentioned who they were, in this case, Salesforce, was going against the metaverse. And let's keep it real, and you know, we need to get real, focus on saving the planet, helping our society today. I thought that was an interesting contrast between two powerhouse companies like that using the forum to, you know, sort of take different sides. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, glad you picked up on that. I'm watching that commercial and I wonder who this is going to be. And then it was Salesforce, which is, you know, use our software tools to work on the real stuff.
Yeah, and then also I was surprised, since we were just talking about ESG, I didn't really see in my face a ESG type statement from some of the corporations who have publicly are supporting ESG very heavily. So, anyway.
But didn't you see all the electric cars?
Oh yeah, and especially the one with the music from Soprano with Meadow driving. And that was awesome. But anyway,
I like Thor. Okay.
Yeah.
No, Zeus.
Yeah, the Zeus thing is fun. Any other comments before we move on from anyone? Okay, so moving on, delivering smart buildings, and as I mentioned, we want to focus on these two layers. So if you look at the smarter stack, this is just a little bit of it at the top. Labeled purpose and operations. The purpose is the why. It's the only layer that really deals with why anything is being done, anything's being made smarter. And the operation is one of the two how layers. And here it's really talking about how it is being operated on a daily basis, right? So it's really the user's perspective of operations, not how we're supplying it. And then the other how is obviously the delivery, but we don't want to really focus on that. So this is kind of the question. And one of the things that this group discussed last week on our Wednesday planning call is that in thinking about the stack and in working on the specifications and other things, we've sort of obviously gravitated on the real big problems like analytics and analytics everywhere and cybersecurity and interoperability. Those are all valid. But we kind of observe that we don't really talk enough about some parts of the stack, which really needs a lot of attention. So this is part of that. And we're going to continue this next week, where we'll probably go to the bottom of the stack on the physical and the system layer, and we focus on that. And then the week after that, we'll figure out what to do. I'm not quite sure about. On this show, we're talking about this purpose and operation. And I'm going to bring down this slide. And the sort of the question that we want to sort of ask ourselves and ask the audience is, who are we talking about here in terms of the purpose and operation? Let's just make sure we're talking about the same types of people, the same sort of categories of people, and what is it that they actually need? So from purpose and operation, who wants to start? I know you've all prepared.
Wow.
Well, I put some thoughts into those other slides that you had, Anto, which I think, you know.
Okay, I'll bring it up. I'll bring them up.
Not a bad starting point, I guess. And happy to take shots at it.
Yeah. So this is what Anna did. I actually did some of that, and Anna did some of that. Building owners. So who in purpose? The obvious ones are building owners, the local manager, by which I certainly mean the individual who's actually managing that facility for whatever that facility is. So it could be a teacher in a school or a manager, somebody actually runs it. Occupants are people who actually just occupy, consume the operation, the facility. Sustainability, I think you put that in, Anno.
Yeah, and I think sort of building on what John and I were talking about earlier, in that we're seeing new groups, departments, initiatives, C-level groups being put together as ESG initiatives. And to John's point, that they come in with a new purpose, and they kind of come in, a bit of a bull of the China shop approach, see what's going on, look at all the projects that are energy savings projects that are going on as well. So they're getting attention because they're getting mandated by the board, typically, to go do ESG, whatever that means, and go find out what's going on already, and to John's point, stop anything that's going on so we can get a good idea on it. I don't think they have plans. They just are on a discovery session at this point. And then I threw finance in there because, interestingly enough, that's actually coming from one of the people that we're working with, quite a large organization, and they kind of threw that in at the top level from a purpose, which I thought was interesting that they used the word finance. They also had sustainability separate, but the fact that they threw finance in there, which is interesting. And then the other ones are, those are sort of people and groups and organizations, but then there's also just platforms that we have to deal with, right? There's information that needs to go to things like Energy Stars and leads and reporting initiatives, that need to provide that data. And then, from my take on the needs, it's these guys at this level, it's pretty simple stuff that they're looking for. What's the summary? Give me the simple overview, don't make it complicated. Give me the high level green, yellow, red picture. What's with the yellow and red? Why does stuff keep happening? And this is one that we run across all the time. At this level, people are more like, okay, if I fixed it once, and I kind of like to get John's take on this, right? You'd think that fault detection diagnostics is a one-time exercise when you speak to some of these folks. They go, okay, great, I'll put it in. I fix it all once and I'm good to go. Thank you very much, John. We don't need it anymore, type of approach. And that's something that seems to trip them up all the time. They think it's like, well, okay, we've looked at it, fixed it. Why does it keep happening? And then you drill down from there. What's the plan to do it? What's it going to cost me? Who's going to do it? When will it be done? That's the type of stuff that these guys get involved with, these parts of the organization. That's my take anyway.
So Brad posted a comment asking about whether we can describe these as personas. I think that's a great way to think about who we're talking about.
Yeah, that's a good approach.
Yeah, I'll respond to a couple of the handoffs you threw out there. So I think it's as I think about it, I think this challenge of adopting and living with things that are continuous is very human nature problem. I mean, why are there deferred maintenance? We know that the thing isn't working right. Why do organizations build up deferred maintenance? If we really understood and embrace total life cycle costs and those things, you probably wouldn't do those things, right? And I think that's a challenge with a lot of the things that most of us on this panel work with. These things aren't screw in a light bulb, walk away, done forever. They're things you have to stay with, right? Hey, the analytics didn't find anything this week. Okay, well, maybe next week the valves will, valve will be stocked. There'll be, they're looking at it from, kind of the LED light bulb mentality, and that's not what using data is for. Not only in the built environment, but in society as general, right? That I don't think Target stops using analytics on sales and merchandising because there was no absolute revolutionary thing found this week. That doesn't mean, well, I guess we don't need to do it ever again, right? I think it's just a real challenge that is maybe in line with your earlier cartoon, Anto, of these human nature problems, right? We're putting all of these green things on a foundation that's being eaten away because of the current rules of our capitalist economy. We don't have free enterprise, we have rules-based capitalism, right? And rules could change, and they do. Taxes change, and what does that do? That drives people to make different business decisions. So I think this is going to be a key part of helping us solve all of these, or begin to address them, is we have to look at these non-LED light bulb things in a different way. And I'm not against LED light bulbs. I got a bunch of them. Okay.
Thoughts, anyone else?
I mean, at the end of the day, right? It's mechanical systems have to succumb to chaos theory. If left alone, they will naturally deteriorate and go to, go back to their natural decayed state. And then the other aspect of it is part of the message we always give at this level is, to your point, we are always dealing with people, and people like to meddle with stuff. People like to just change things just because it's something they think they want to do, whether it's done on purpose or to immediacy or just cause, or they forget or whatever. It's just the nature of people, as you said, John, right?
So my 2 cents on this is we could go crazy talking through various aspects of purpose and operations here. I'm hoping we can stay focused on the big picture, which is interoperability. What is the purpose of interoperability? Who are the people that are affected by the need to make systems interoperable? And so when I look at your list, Anno, for example, building owners, the local manager, occupants, etc., I fail to see systems integrators, the service providers, the people who actually have to make the systems interoperable. Yes, there may be some personnel on site from a facility standpoint that can also need to do that, but generally in our industry, it's accomplished at one of the companies that we work with who provides these systems on a turnkey basis. They're the ones that are struggling to make the systems interoperable. So again, from the objective here is we're trying to specify what systems need to look like to make them interoperable such that they are that, okay? And the purpose for making them interoperable is because it's going to make it possible for this data to then be usable and available to the owners to reduce operating costs, to meet regulations, to meet emerging standards. to meet their ESG objectives. Those are the purposes. Those are examples of purposes. But again, if we can, let's stay focused on the interoperability issue, because that's why we're writing a specification.
I
Guys,
agree
with
with
me or
you,
not?
Steve, but I wonder if that piece belongs further down in the delivery and operations and exchange areas that deliver this function, right? To me, the SI and the technology of integration and all those pieces feed up into this capability, right? There's no way I can present a summary chart of all the energy usage of a particular area unless someone has done all that interoperability, integration, and data exchange at the lowest levels. So I think it's definitely part of the purpose, but does it belong? Is that function belonging up at the highest level of the purpose, which is another whole question? Is there actually hierarchy here? And I think we've had this discussion before. To your point, by having a stack, there's an implied hierarchy. I don't know that that's really correct or relevant, because depending upon what your business is and what your focus is, say for example, your business is a systems integration business, right? Then probably that, where you tend to operate is in the physical systems and data areas. But that doesn't mean that has less priority or less importance than the purpose or the operation, right? I mean, in some ways, this is one of the challenges I have with the stack, is that it implies a hierarchy that I think does that mean that purpose is more important than data or systems? No, I don't think so, because one can't happen without the other.
To me, this is kind of like the A. I was talking about VUCA and tuna earlier. The A is ambiguous, and this is, I think, one part of the stack that is a little bit ambiguous. The purpose, the sort of the main reason for a purpose is, what is the purpose of making the building smart, right? Certainly from a building perspective, that is kind of the primary objective. I think what you're talking about, Steve, is that once you start thinking about what do system integrators need to do, what the different vendors need to do, then you start to have these other layers, which it's really sort of, it's not a hierarchy, it's more of a different dimension or different layers, which is how do we think about delivering it. I don't think any of these sort of primary personas, to use that word, care about system integration or interoperability at all. They care about other things, which is to do with the purpose of the building at this point, at this level.
Well, that's what I was trying to say, though, Anto. I think they care. They just don't know that they care.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that this stuff can get delivered without the system integration and the data integration pieces. You could want all you want about what's the summary of going on. So the question really becomes, okay, if I want to get a summary of what's going on in my facility, well, you could do it like the old days, send a guy around with a clipboard and record everything, and the whole team of people, and you might get it in 6 months. Or there's a whole level of smart technology now that can provide that capability.
I think this is a little bit like most things, and I was thinking a little bit like Marcus pointed out there, compliance and risk mitigation. I was thinking about, facility management and efficiency. If the purpose is to make it more efficient, by getting, if something fails, the right guy with the right spare visits site once, they're minimizing the downtime, you're just making the whole operation more efficient. But it's the facility management, they aren't the who, then they become the operation, and the efficiency becomes the efficient operation becomes the purpose.
Yeah, along with Mark and Roger, my list looks very similar. I did have energy efficiency, carbon mitigation, risk management, contractual compliance, vendor management, these kinds of value propositions in closer to that needs category.
And cost reduction.
Right.
Yeah,
The-
so I agree with everything you guys are saying in terms of the purpose. I'm just saying that one of the things that Anto brought up was who cares about these purposes? And that's all I'm saying. I agree with Anto from your perspective about where that systems integrator is going to spend his or her time is going to be down at the delivery line or within the technology itself. I'm just saying that for us to deliver these outcomes, these purposes, we need the systems integrators to, they're many cases being asked to achieve those outcomes as part of their scope. Is what I'm getting at. That's all.
We get a class, I kind of see this not so much as a hierarchy, but degrees of tangibility, right? The higher you are, closer to purpose, the less tangible some of the things are.
Yeah.
The further you go down the stack, the more tangible they are. And interestingly, just building on what you just said, Steve, you reminded me of combine what Anto said and what you just said. The people on the purpose side just want these outcomes. They don't care so much how they get there. But the people on the delivery side do care how they get there and need to understand and should care the purpose and the whys, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So-
that's really well said, Tracy.
We're trying to, magically make all the stuff, non-visible that comes below the purpose layer. And yet we all know we have to understand the purpose in order to deliver what is there. So we need to know the details that go into that.
What a beautiful segue to operations then. So operations is the next layer. And the question attached to that is how is it being operated daily, right? So it is who or what is actually there operating the buildings. The obvious ones are facility managers, resource managers, energy managers. I'm starting to think about those as together or similar. And then there's people and visitor manager, which is really to do with the people who are actually occupying the buildings. Maybe there are others, but and then I think you put this in, Anno.
Yeah, and just to come back to that, because obviously where we focus and where our purpose has everything to do. So the way that we kind of break up these functionalities is sort of into what we call three categories, right? It's issue management, information management, and actor management. And I think one of the things that we actually suffer here on the Monday Live group is we've got a lot of good experience and expertise in the issue and the information space. We don't have a lot of good folks here who talk about what we call the actor management, right? The people, the occupants. How do the people visitor management, the COVID tracing, the room booking services, there's a lot of ancillary smart functionality that makes building smarter that really has nothing to do with energy savings, operational savings per se, but has everything to do with tenant satisfaction, occupant satisfaction, right? Can I get into my space easily? Can I, put work orders in easily? Can I book a room easily? Et cetera, et cetera. And I think, it's something we don't address much here when we discuss it.
Experience is really one way of
the experience, right? What's the actual occupant experience? Wayfinding, people finding, people movement, all that sort of good stuff.
I just to add another dimension to keep it on the table and keep our thinking open a little bit. If what you're describing, Anno, is large commercial applications and buildings, right? When I look at this and think of it from a retail space or restaurants, QSRs, for instance, and places of that nature, the who on the left that's listed there very often is one person. It's the same person, right? They're calling to get the HVAC repaired. They're incentivized to reduce energy consumption. They're managing and understanding, number of visits and people coming into the stores and making purchases and so forth. So owner occupied, if you will, kind of space could be a little bit different, where that all has to be one person or one.
Out of interest, Tracy, something I've been wondering, in the retail space, the smaller retail spaces that you deal with, and I know you heavily focus on the, the energy, the operations and all that sort of stuff. But I would have thought that the tenant experience, which is the shopper, the buyer, the purchaser, I would believe that's a higher value from a retail perspective, right? I mean, how to help the purchaser find things easily, making sure the environment's, in a wonderful experience. My experience has been that's been a bigger deal for them than whether you manage to save $200 worth of energy for the month.
You would think so. And
Okay.
and I would say it kind of depends on the operation, right? So we did a lot of work with Intel and a number of their partners, and the focus on some of the people using different Intel technologies. And a lot of it was on where do the shoppers travel, in which direction do they go, where is their eye focus, how often do they pick things up and put things down, and how does that translate into sales? And if they move things around or change the flow, does that increase or decrease sales? And for high dollar, high value items, say high-end retail, much more important, because if they can sell one more sweater that costs $400 versus saving $100 in energy costs for the month, of course, that's much more valuable, right?
Right.
But in a quick serve restaurant, it's a volume thing. The experience is the same. They're not worried about adjusting a whole lot of that until they go to, new layouts or new facilities or whatever. They're not making those changes. It's the same always. So it becomes more about some of these other things. Now, comfort is still a factor for most. I won't say all, because surprisingly, a big difference between the most sophisticated operators and the least sophisticated operators. And when I say operators, I mean big brands that you would recognize daily, right? Or in your everyday conversations. So some care a lot and some just don't care. They want to keep the doors open and the equipment up and running and moving product, right? So
Yeah.
We often deal with the if we can get the one person that I mentioned on our side with these kinds of systems, they tend to be much more successful. What we do find is sometimes there's competing needs in there, where the owner wants efficiency and cost reduction and energy reduction and so forth. But these people who tend to occupy the middle layers of management, district managers and such, it's about making their job easier, right?
Yeah.
Don't give me a system that's going to make me have more work or make things more complicated. If you can make my job easier, then I'm all for it and I'll support you, right? So even within that, they have different needs, right?
Yeah.
Eventually it gets down to the people, right? In the end, it's still people we're talking about. And depending on the industry, make my job easier is a driving factor for a lot of decision making, surprisingly.
Especially
Would you
if it's
put that, Tracy, up on the purpose line then?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
make my job easier.
Right.
Yeah.
Does it go in both?
I
Mhm.
think so. Heavily
I'd-
the purpose.
How do you differentiate, Tracy, between make my job easier and make my job go away?
Yeah, there's a fine line there, and sometimes it's careful what you ask for, right? Because you might just get it. We run into that fear regularly with even with facilities type people, where they see automation as a threat to their existence, right?
So job security is a need.
Yeah.
Really what it is.
or at least a concern, a guiding decision-making concern.
Just on that make my job easier thing, there's the inverse perspective of that, which I found interesting, is for those of us who've been in this space for a long time, in the early days, these systems were easy, right? You had a control system, a DDC, you had a thermostat. In fact, for those of us who went back to the pneumatic days, it was easy to debug. You just come in on a Sunday and you listen for leaks. That's how you debugged a pneumatic system back then. But over time, we've just made the poor operator's life harder and harder, right? We've decided that, okay, you need a BAS system. Oh, now we can actually see the sensors. Oh, we're going to put it on a screen for you so you can see it. Oh, you're still not looking at it. So we're going to trend it. We're going to put histories on it so you can see graphs and charts. You're still not looking at it. So we're going to send you alarms. We're going to send you umpteen alarms. Well, you're not looking at the alarms. So let's color code them, prioritize them. No offense, John, you're not looking at the alarms. Let's put fault detection diagnostics on top of that because, you're ignoring the alarms. Oh, by the way, you're ignoring everything else. How about work orders? You should look at all the work orders. So weirdly enough, to your point, Tracy, we've just been overlaying newer and newer stuff going, you've ignored everything else I've told you. So here's a new way of looking at the same stuff that I've been looking at for the last 20 years. Nothing's changed. Thermostat's still broken.
I do confess, I have heard the statement, my job was so much easier when I didn't know what was going on.
Yes.
So listening to us talking about both the purpose and the operation, both these layers, it seems to be that is significantly about people, maybe much more so than lower down in the layer. It is, I don't know, 80-90%. The concerns are about people. The decisions are all about people and their behaviors and needs and things. Is that a good summation to say that?
I would tie what you just said back to what Steve was talking about earlier, which is interoperability and the need, right? We're trying to understand, using this model, what will help us educate people on the need for interoperability. Understanding what drives the decision-making at these two layers can help us understand how best to educate about interoperability and why that is important. So I think those are both really kind of true here. That this is about interoperability, and if we keep that in mind, we need to understand these two layers, and these layers are about people and how they make decisions.
Absolutely, I think that's absolutely the right perspective, right? Because everything that we've got here all details too. Well, you need the data, and the problem is the data's all over the map right now. It's everywhere, and in fact, that actually made the job harder, like I explained earlier, right? So it needs to come together.
Yeah, and so we've all been in the control room with the siloed stations, right? The myriad of workstations, bang, 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 right? And so the goal here in terms of making things interoperable is that the things that are important can be consolidated across the systems into a single experience. I'm not going to say a single workstation necessarily, but into a single experience that whether it shows up, as some sort of alarm or some sort of report or however it manifests, it means that the person or persons who are responsible get the information they need to do their job effectively and more easily than they can today, because the barrier to trying to accomplish that goal is the fact that the systems aren't interoperable, right?
I think what you're saying, Steve, hopefully is kind of what I've been thinking, what we've all been thinking for years, is that when you used to have an on-site supervisor, and that was as far as the data or the information went, if the PC was stuck there with 500 alarms and the electrician had been given the job to look after it, and he just left them there. Whereas what we're talking about now is getting the data to the right people who can deal with the information, i.e. whether it's the maintenance guy or whether it's the space management or whether it's financial, whatever, it's getting the right information to the right people who are going to action it. And so it's actionable from the information, which it wasn't before.
So Sean raised a point about split incentives, which is obviously we've talked about that. Where do we put that in here? I mean, it's not a need. It's kind of like.
Well, it's actually it's more than just split, right? It's a little bit to what John was talking about earlier too, about, you know, a lot of the initiatives we had before were counterintuitive to the incentives of the management teams that were supposed to run it, right? So, which we're starting to see change a little bit with ESG and type initiatives. Yeah, it's more like conflicting incentives. It's probably a. And it's still a challenge. I think, you know, it hasn't gone away.
It's not a need. It's actually dealing with
the conflicting and incentives. Yeah, and you know, we've all been there, right? You go into one organization and you talk to 3 departments, and you'll come away. It's only different focuses on what they're trying to do.
Again, people centric.
Yeah, again,
primarily.
people centric. They're how they're making their decisions are based on different incentives, right? Capital budget versus expense and operating budget. Classic.
And that's and what John Tin is saying there, right? Trying to get any of these organizations to have aligned incentives. That's a huge challenge, right? Because now you're trying to change the internal organizational motives.
Yeah, but you know, that could be an interesting, if we were out educating people on
Yes,
why we needed interoperability, that should be part of the conversation.
yeah, I agree. This is probably, you know, I agree. I think, and this is how we've been using the tool, right? Is to help educate organizations internally about the fact that they've got misaligned incentives, and this tool actually helps at least people come together with common verbiage, if nothing else. They might still have different incentives, but at least they've got something that lines up their discussion.
Because it goes to lots of other needs and challenges. Because there's lots of people that have different motivations and incentives. So in aligning incentives, and is that something that we should, I mean, I know we care about it, but is that something that's within our purview to care about?
I think it has to be part of the discussion somewhere. If you're looking at this from an overall perspective, and I'll take a classic, somebody's job, a manager, and again, I'll pick on like a restaurant. Manager's job, the floor manager, is make the customers comfortable, right? Which sometimes is contrary to somebody who is looking at energy costs, who wants to set the temperature up a degree or down a degree or whatever it might be. And those, if somebody is given the sole incentive or incentivized to say, make the customers comfortable, and somebody else is reduce my energy spend, those don't necessarily align. And that's just the nature of everyday management.
Hey, can I comment on that one? Tracy,
What's
I
that?
want to comment on that. I don't disagree with you, but I keep hearing this come up, especially in relation to the IAQ thing. How do you rationalize, you know, more air against, you know, it uses more energy? And my point that I try to get across is if you're effectively managing your systems and you're using data, hey, no question we're biased, most likely you would identify energy waste that would far exceed the amount of energy you're going to use to throw a little more air to the occupants, right? But people don't want to think that. They just think what I have is my baseline and it's perfect. And you want me to give more air to the occupants, it's going to cost me more air? No, time out. Most likely, and in fact, not a single project I have ever seen was a building running perfectly. Now, of course, Jim, you may have had different encounters.
John, I'm completely with you.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to reflect on John, what's his name? John Tierney comment.
That's great.
This is kind of the, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of the nuggets so far that I'll put it up there.
And you do a good job. That's good.
That's really, really good.
Hope
Because
he's
it
not
actually
gonna
ties
trademark.
in, it ties in the people, it ties in the conflicts, and it ties in interoperability to get to
Mhm.
Steve's point. That's where we want to get.
And data centric, right? Everything flows off from the information
Yeah.
that comes.
Mhm.
Okay, so we've solved the problem then.
Yeah, we're good. We're done.
No, we
Done.
identified it. It's people.
4 minutes to spare.
So let me throw this out on John's statement. Great decisions built off good data made possible by interoperability. Great statement, John. How great decisions built off accurate data made possible by interoperability.
Isn't that what good means? Or
That's kind of, I like that because
To me, good and accurate are two different things,
Hmm.
but that's me.
yeah, I don't know.
Splitting hairs.
See, accuracy, the problem, I, in some respect, the reason I like good is it also encompasses the concept of relevant data. You can have accurate data that is of the, the outside temperature at Alaska, but does it mean anything to me? Is it relevant to me?
Mhm.
So it might
Another
be
one
accurate.
by Dan Burns, trusted data. That's good. one.
Yeah, that's true.
Relevant data. Yeah, good, for me personally, good is not strong enough, I don't think,
Mhm, mhm.
getting the message.
Okay.
Yeah,
Elusive
That's
and
me.
elusive.
cool.
this is really great. And that again, similarly, it applies here as well. Really, because if you recall the smarter stack, the description as to how we got here, we actually started with one layer here. We started with users, and we split it into purpose and operations right at the beginning of sort of figuring out the stack. So we basically are saying, okay, there's some dynamics here between purpose and operation that obviously is there, and then there's kind of dynamics between that and how it consumes the smarts that's underneath it.
I think ultimately the goal here from our perspective is finding a way to create the demand for interoperability, right? And so that phrase leads directly to that connection, right?
Yeah, it's a bottom-up approach, right? Interoperability gives you good data, gives you great decisions.
Yeah.
It flows up.
And to Mark's point about good versus accurate and so forth, that's a never-ending battle in my world. We don't need a space temperature update for the dining room down to 2 decimal places once every 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think that's what's good about the word good is that it means that it's good enough for it to be useful.
Yeah, but it
We'll
could
agree,
be-
we'll agree to disagree. So there you
But
go.
if-
No, I agree with what Mark is saying also, but
to support Mark there a little bit, accurate could be not just to 2 decimal places, just the sensors in the right place.
Yeah.
In other words, we've moved from, oh, it's all about big data. Do we really care about big data? No, we care about the right data
The
to
right data.
make the right type of
Yeah.
decisions
Mhm.
that need to be made, right?
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's the right data, built off the right data.
Yeah, because in many cases that can be very limited amount of data for certain.
That's
types of
really true.
products. It doesn't,
Exactly.
and so somebody was just getting that. We don't need reading every 30 seconds from that type of, that device, right? There are many things. I mean, look at what you can do with just interval meter data, which utility people call that real-time data, right? Someone operating a valve doesn't consider that too real time. So.
Okay, this is great. We need
Yeah.
to bring this to a wrap because we're just past 4 o'clock. So this is really, really wonderful. I think we learned a lot here just by focusing in on 2 layers. We'll probably focus on the 2 bottom layers next week, the system and physical. That's kind of how the thinking goes, but we'll find out next week.
Okay.
But with that, I thank everybody for their participation and everybody, attendees and everybody. And video of this will be out tomorrow. And with that, have a great week. Bye-bye all.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Cheers.
Later. Bye.
Bye.
Hello.